Okay, reflection for chapters 5, 13, and 14 for Professor Leet's Intro to Social Work class, SOWK251. So, chapter 5 focused on poverty and inequality. So, some of the stuff that I thought was really interesting about this chapter had to do with some of the statistics they posted. So, like, for one, they talked about food stamps, which was actually rebranded to SNAP, which stands for Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Uh, and over 46 million Americans are on SNAP. I didn't realize it was that high. That's crazy. That's 1 in 7 Americans are on SNAP and need assistance with food. That just blows my mind. Uh, in 2019, on page 129, 10.5% of the population is living below the poverty line. I mean, that is a lot. That's more than 1 in 10 people. I just was not expecting it to be that high. Some other things I thought were interesting about the chapter were kind of just the different bills they mentioned and things they did to um, try and help people in poverty over the years. They also juxtaposed a lot of Trump era issues with a lot of Biden era issues, or policies, I should say, and how Trump repealed a lot of stuff and tried to like make budget cuts, whereas Biden seemed to reinforce a lot of issues, and I thought that was pretty interesting to read about. That was chapter 5. So going on to chapter 13. Chapter 13 talks about communities and at-risk housing. So here they talk about home ownership versus renting versus subsidized housing, the different groups in housing, and that was also fairly interesting stuff. At one point they talked about the homeless population. I know on page 406, they mentioned in 2019 how over 500,000 people were experiencing homelessness. Again, numbers like these they're higher than what I would expect. You see some people on the street that are homeless, but to think that there's over 500,000 Americans that are homeless, that just is mind blowing to me. Also, they talked about liar loans, which were part of the 2008 housing crisis. I wish they spent more time talking about that in this chapter. I think that is really interesting, just how like banks and the government and everything kind of fell apart and collapsed, and then there was a recovery, but that was a pretty big thing. Um, a lot of people like lost their houses. A lot of people got foreclosed on. Um, and then so that was chapter 13. Chapter 14 talked about the changing workplace. Talks about different microaggressions, macroaggressions, discrimination in the workplace based on age, based on race, based on sexual orientation, um, all of these kind of things. And so that part about microaggressions to me was also really interesting because like that's something that you can't really fix well with policy. So instead, that's where a social worker can really come into play. It reminds me when I worked at Best Buy. One time, a woman told me what her name was, and it was a unique, interesting sounding name. And I asked her what the country of origin it was, and she like got really upset. She started crying. I guess she got asked that a lot, and it came off the wrong way. So small stuff like that, like it wasn't even intentional. And that's my reflections on chapter 5, 13, and 14.